It is a lie, this log, a final testament written in a language of ghosts for an audience that will never read it. Every word is a betrayal of the Officio, of the holy purpose beaten into my bones since I was old enough to hold a blade. But the truth has become a poison, and I must let it out before it consumes what little is left of me. My name is a sin I no longer remember. My face is a weapon I no longer control. Here, on this gilded carbuncle of a world called Viridia Prime, I am known as Sylvana, consort to the great Lord Valerius Corvo. And for 3 standard years, that has been enough. The Grand Orrery Hall is an exercise in opulent decay. I stand at Valerius's side, a silent, beautiful ornament he purchased with whispers of power and promises of influence. My skin, sculpted by the sacred alchemy of polymorphine, is flawless. My gown, a cascade of void silk that shimmers like an oil slick on black water, clings to a form designed for adulation and, ultimately, for murder. Above us, a crystalline ceiling shows the slow, majestic dance of Viridia's heavens. The bloated purple giant, the twin emerald moons, the distant, hateful glimmer of the Astronomicon. It is all a lie, a beautiful, intricate lie, just like me. Valerius's hand rests on the small of my back, his thumb tracing possessive circles. His touch is a brand, a claim of ownership I have allowed, cultivated, and used as the primary vector for my infiltration. He is a traitor, a heretic bloating himself on the Imperium's stolen blood, and his death is my sole purpose for existence. His heart will stop at my command. His life is a debt to the Golden Throne, and I am the collector. It is a simple, clean equation. It was, at least. Valerius is speaking, his voice a rich baritone that captivates the fawning sycophants arrayed before us. He speaks of a new age for the sector, of freedom from the shackles of terror, of prosperity built on his own strength. Treason, sweetened with honey and served on silver platters. I watch the faces in the crowd, the gluttonous, the ambitious, the fearful. They are all carrion birds, circling a feast they do not yet realize is poisoned. My mind is a cold machine, cataloging their allegiances, their weaknesses, the subtle tells of their greed. This one's gaze lingers too long on Valerius's crony. That one's fingers tremble as he sips his amasec. All data, all ammunition for the day of reckoning. My conditioning is a fortress, my purpose a singular burning star. I am a weapon, honed and aimed. Nothing can change that. Then she arrives. Lady Elara Corvo moves through the throng, not like its mistress, but like a prisoner. Where her husband is fire and bombast, she is still water. She wears a simple gown of deep cerulean, unadorned by the garish jewels favored by the other noble women. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, is bound in a simple braid. She is Valerius's wife, a political marriage to secure a neighboring subsector, and by all accounts, a ghost in her own home. He flaunts me, his exotic pet, while she is expected to endure with quiet dignity. And she does. O throne, she does. Our eyes meet across the hall. It is not the first time, but tonight it is different. There is no jealousy in her gaze, no resentment, only a profound, bottomless weariness that seems to echo a hollowness deep within my own being. I have studied her, of course. She is part of the mission architecture, a variable to be accounted for. Subject profile, Elara Corvo, noble birth, pious in a quiet, personal way. No political ambition. Interests include xenobotanical cultivation and pre-imperial literature. A non-threat. A piece of sterile scenery. My training screams this litany of facts at me, a shield against what? Against the simple, unvarnished humanity in her eyes. Valerius finally finishes his speech, basking in the applause. His hand tightens on me, pulling me closer. "Isn't she magnificent?" he booms to a nearby baron, his breath thick with the scent of aged wine. "A jewel found in the gutters of a backwater world. I polished her myself." He winks, a lewd, possessive gesture that sends a wave of revulsion through me. It is a calculated, cold revulsion, the proper response. The emotion is a tool, just as my body is. I smile demurely, the perfect picture of the grateful courtesan. I am playing my part. Later, as the orchestra plays a dirge-like waltz, I find a moment of solitude on one of the balconies overlooking the palace gardens. The air here is thick with the cloying sweetness of night-blooming ghostfire orchids, their petals glowing with a faint ethereal light. I breathe it in, letting the cool air clear my head. The mask of Sylvanas is heavy tonight. The strain of constant deception, the proximity to my target, it is a low-grade fever that never breaks. They are beautiful, are they not? But they feed on dying things. The voice is soft right behind me. I do not startle. My body is incapable of such an uncontrolled reaction. I turn slowly, my posture relaxed, a gentle, curious expression sliding into place. It is Elara. She stands a few feet away, her hands clasped before her, her gaze on the spectral flowers below. "My lady," I murmur, inclining my head, the perfect degree of deference. "Please," she says, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. "In this house, I am the least of all ladies. Call me Elara." She steps closer, standing beside me at the balustrade. She doesn't look at me, but at the sprawling gardens. Valerius had them imported from a death world, a trophy. He sees their beauty. I only see their hunger. Her observation is astute, uncomfortably so. It cuts through the pageantry to the rotten core of this place, of her husband. I say nothing, letting the silence hang. My training dictates I remain a pleasant enigma, a beautiful surface with no discernible depth. Giving away nothing is the first rule of survival. "He is not a kind man," she says, the words barely a whisper. It is a statement of fact, not a complaint. She finally turns her head, and her eyes, the gray of a storm-tossed sea, fix on me. "He is not kind to you, I know." This is a test, a trap. Is she trying to solicit a complaint, to find a weakness in Valerius's new favorite? My mind races through protocols, response trees, deception strata. The correct answer is a placid denial. "My lord is most generous, my lady," but the words do not come. I look into her eyes and see not a political player, but a fellow captive. I see the faint, faded bruise on her wrist, almost perfectly concealed by her sleeve. A bruise I know for a fact was not there yesterday. I know this because I see everything. And in that moment, the fortress of my conditioning develops a hairline crack. "No," I hear myself say. The voice of Sylvana, soft and yielding. He is not. The honesty of it hangs in the air, a shocking, terrifying thing. It is a catastrophic mission failure, a breach of 1,000 sacred doctrines. I have exposed a sliver of my true assessment. I have created a bond, however tenuous, with a non-essential asset. My heart, a lump of cold, professionally regulated muscle, gives a painful thud. Elara's expression does not change. She simply nods, a slow, solemn gesture of understanding, of shared experience. She reaches out, and her fingers, cool and delicate, briefly touch the back of my hand where it rests on the cold marble. The contact is electric. It is not the calculated touch of a seducer or the possessive grip of a master. It is gentle, a simple human acknowledgement. "Be careful, Sylvana," she whispers, and the name feels alien on her lips, a costume that has suddenly become too small.
Beauty is the first thing a man like my husband seeks to break. Then she is gone, melting back into the party's gilded throng, leaving me alone with the carnivorous flowers and the catastrophic warmth spreading from the spot where she touched me. I stare at my hand as if it has been burned. The feeling is an impurity, a contamination in the sterile environment of my soul. I feel a sudden, violent urge to scour my skin, to peel back the face of Sylvana and reveal the nameless, formless killer beneath. The mission is everything. The self is nothing. This is the first and last commandment. But for the first time in my life, a seed of heresy has been planted not in the mind of my target, but in the barren, blood-soaked soil of my own heart. Back in the sterile anonymity of my private chambers, the touch still burned. It was a phantom heat on my skin, a focal point of corruption I could not excise. I stripped off the shimmering gown, letting it pool on the floor like a dead thing's shed skin, and stood before the mirror steel wall. The woman staring back was a masterpiece of deception. Sylvana, high cheekbones, eyes the color of warm honey, lips full and perpetually curved in a subtle, inviting smile. A face designed to disarm, to seduce, to draw a man's secrets from his throat with a whisper. A lie. It was a lie I had worn so long it had begun to feel like truth, and that was the most dangerous heresy of all. My hand trembled as I reached for the recessed panel beside the mirror. It slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the tools of my true faith: a compact sin-skin applicator, a needle-thin vibro knife, several charges of plasticized explosive, and the dull pewter vials of polymorphine. I needed to reset, to purge the weakness Elara's simple, artless gesture had introduced into my system. My conditioning screamed at me, a chorus of 1,000 training masters, their voices like grinding stone. Emotion is a flaw in the weapon's design.
Empathy is a poison that dulls the blade's edge. The self is the mission's first and most necessary casualty. I uncapped a vial. The drug's sterile, ozone scent was a sacrament. The needle slid into the flesh of my thigh with a familiar, painless precision. I did not need to change my face. Valerius would not see me again until morning. This was not for the mission. This was for me. An act of violent self-purification. The change came on like a fever. A deep cellular shudder began in my core, a vibration that felt like every atom of my being was being shaken loose from its neighbor. I braced my hands against the wall, knuckles white, as the alchemy took hold.
My reflection began to distort, the features of Sylvana melting like wax held too close to a flame. My jawline softened and then sharpened again. My nose broadened and then narrowed. It was agony, but it was a clean, familiar agony. It was the pain of the forge, the torment of being reshaped into a tool fit for the Emperor's holy purpose. I let it wash over me, a tide of exquisite pain that drowned out the memory of a gentle touch on a balcony. I watched my face shift through a dozen forgotten identities, masks I had worn on other worlds, for other kills. A grizzled manufactorum foreman from Ryza, a sharp-faced administratum scribe from Hydrafure, a scarred ganger from the underhives of Necromunda. Ghosts. I was a vessel for ghosts. I pushed the transformation further, letting the drug strip away all semblance of humanity, my features becoming a formless, terrifying canvas of gray, featureless flesh. The tabula rasa, the blank slate, the true face of the Callidus. In this state there was no Sylvana, there was no Elara. There was only the cold, silent void of purpose. I collapsed onto the floor, the drug's aftershocks racking my body, and for a few blessed hours I felt nothing at all. The respite was temporary. The seed had been planted, and in the fertile ground of Viridia's opulence it began to grow. The days that followed were a new kind of hell. I performed my duties as Sylvana with flawless precision. I was Valerius's shadow, his confidant, the beautiful creature on his arm, who listened to his treasonous plans with a rapturous, adoring gaze. I charted his network of co-conspirators, logged his secret communications, identified the structural weaknesses in his palace's defenses. The mission progressed, but the cold machine of my mind now had a ghost haunting its cogs. Her name was Elara. I saw her in the grand atrium, arranging a bouquet of the very ghostfire orchids we had spoken of. She worked with a delicate, focused grace, her fingers trimming the stems with a small silver knife. She did not see me as I passed with Valerius, who was boasting loudly about a new shipment of off-world weaponry. But I saw her. I saw the way the morning light caught in her pale hair. I saw the quiet concentration in her eyes, a small island of peace in an ocean of depravity. My conditioning supplied the tactical data. She is occupied. Her attention is focused inward. She poses no threat. But another alien part of my mind simply observed. She is beautiful. The thought was an intrusion, a foreign body in my psyche, and I recoiled from it with a jolt of pure panic. Our paths crossed again a week later in the Xenobotanical Gardens, a vast crystal dome where Elara cultivated her strange, dangerous flora. I was there on a pretext, scouting the Arboretum's ventilation systems as a potential infiltration route. I moved silently through groves of razor-petaled flora and past pools of shimmering, sentient algae. I found her near a bed of Cathan devil snares, their long tendrilled leaves twitching hungrily. She was wearing simple gardening gloves and humming a tune I did not recognize, a melody that was soft and melancholic. This time, she saw me. Her humming stopped, and the faint blush rose on her cheeks as if I had caught her in a private, intimate moment.
"Sylvana," she said, her voice quiet, "you are a long way from the court. My lord grows weary of the same gilded walls," I lied smoothly, the words tasting like ash. "He sent me to find a new diversion." Elara looked down at the carnivorous plant,
prodding its root base gently with a trowel. There are no diversions here, only things that grow and things that feed. One must be careful to know the difference. Her eyes flickered up to me, gray and piercingly intelligent. It was another warning, another acknowledgement of our shared prison. I felt that hairline crack in my soul widen into a fissure. We spoke for a time. She told me the names of the plants, their origins, their lethal properties. She spoke of the Mordian corpse lily, which bloomed only in the presence of death, and the nocturne creeper, whose pollen could induce waking nightmares. She spoke not with the pride of a collector, but with the weary resignation of a zookeeper. She understood the nature of this place, the hungry, predatory heart that beat beneath its beautiful skin. And as she spoke, I did the unthinkable. I let the mask of Sylvanas slip, just for a moment. I asked her a question that was not a calculated move or a fishing expedition for intelligence. It was a genuine query, born of a nascent, terrifying curiosity. "Why do you stay?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "In this place, with him." Elara stopped her work and looked at me, her expression unreadable. For a long moment I thought I had made a fatal error, revealing an emotional depth that Sylvana, the shallow courtesan, should not possess. My every nerve screamed at me to retreat, to dissemble, to laugh it off as a silly question. But I held her gaze. "My marriage to Valerius holds the peace between this sector and my homeworld," she said, her voice flat as if reciting a catechism. "Billions of lives rest on this arrangement. My feelings are a luxury the Imperium cannot afford." She turned back to her lethal plants. "Some cages are built of duty, not of steel." Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. A cage of duty. Was that not what my entire life had been? The Officio, my training, my mission, a cage forged from the holiest of duties, designed to contain the monster they had made and aim it at the enemies of mankind. In her, I saw a mirror of my own servitude, stripped of the righteous violence and cloaked in a tragic, quiet nobility. The connection I felt was no longer just a contamination, it was a resonance, a shared frequency of pain. This new reality began to poison my work. When Valerius took me to his bedchambers, his touch felt fouler than ever before. His whispers of conquest and power were a droning insect buzz in my ear. I would lie beside him in the dark, my body a rigid instrument of deception, and my mind would be in the gardens, listening to a soft, melancholic song. The revulsion I felt was no longer a cold, professional tool. It was hot, personal, and stained with a fierce, protective anger I had never known, an anger on Elara's behalf. Once I saw him strike her. It was a private moment in a gallery, a swift, brutal backhand for some perceived slight, a comment that undermined his ego before a visiting dignitary. He did it quietly, almost casually, when he thought no one was looking. But I was looking. I always was. He grabbed her arm, his fingers bruising the pale skin, and hissed something in her ear. Elara did not cry out. Her face remained a mask of placid endurance, but I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, the tightening of her jaw. And in that instant, a red wave of pure, unadulterated fury surged through me. It was an impulse so violent, so contrary to my programming, that it left me breathless. My hand twitched, my fingers instinctively curling around the memory of a hilt. I could have killed him right there. A single fluid motion, a snapped neck, a vibroblade between the ribs. It would have been easy.
My mission objective is the termination of the primary target, Valerius Corvo.
This is a tactically advantageous opportunity. The cold logic of the Officio spoke in my mind, but a new voice screamed over it. He hurt her. The conflict was tearing me apart. I began to rely on the polymorphine more and more. It was my only escape. The ritual became a desperate addiction. After my duties were done for the night, I would lock myself away and flood my system with the drug. I started craving the transition, the excruciating dissolution of self. I would spend hours letting my face writhe and reform, not to create a new identity, but to annihilate the one I had. I was fleeing from Sylvana, the beautiful consort, and I was fleeing from the nameless killer whose purpose had become corrupted. But most of all, I was fleeing from the terrifying, fragile thing that was growing in the space between them. The person who felt a forbidden loyalty to Elara Corvo. I was losing control. The edges of my identities began to blur. Sometimes I would wake in the morning and not remember which face I would find in the mirror. My hands would shake until I administered a small stabilizing dose. I stopped responding to the coded astropathic pings from my handlers. Let them think I was maintaining deep cover. The truth was, I was adrift, cutting the lines to my own sanity, one vial at a time. I was isolating myself not just from the Imperium, but from myself. The end of the beginning came on a night when the twin emerald moons hung like judgmental eyes in the sky. I had just returned from a clandestine meeting with one of Valerius's shipmasters, my mind full of shipping manifests and weapon counts. The data was critical. It was the final proof the High Lords needed. I slipped through the palace corridors, a ghost in my own skin, and made for my chambers. But as I passed the library, I saw a light burning from under the door. I paused. My instincts, honed over a lifetime of stealth and paranoia, told me to move on. But a different, stronger impulse made me push the door open a silent crack. Elara was inside, asleep in a large armchair, a data slate having slipped from her lap onto the thick rug. A book of pre-imperial poetry lay open on the table beside her. The room was quiet, save for the soft sigh of her breathing and the hum of the single-lumen globe that cast a warm golden light on her face. Her expression in sleep was one of profound peace, a look I had never seen on her while she was awake. The weary lines were gone. The perpetual tension in her jaw had vanished. She looked innocent, young, free. I stood there for a long time, an intruder in her moment of tranquility. I watched the slow rise and fall of her chest. I saw the faded bruise on her wrist, a stark mark against her pale skin. And I felt the fortress of my conditioning, the bedrock of my entire existence, crumble into dust. This woman was not a variable. She was not a non-essential asset. She was the only thing in this entire galaxy that felt real. Carefully, I crept into the room. My movements made no sound. I retrieved the data slate from the floor and placed it on the table. I then picked up a velvet throw from a nearby divan and gently, so gently, draped it over her shoulders. My fingers brushed against her neck, and the warmth of her skin was a terrifying, wonderful shock. She stirred, murmuring something in her sleep, but did not wake. I stood over her for a moment longer, a killer playing the role of a guardian.
my heart a chaotic storm in my chest. Then I retreated, pulling the door silently closed. Back in my chamber, the reality of my actions crashed down upon me. It was an act of tenderness, an act of care, an act of love. The word itself was a blasphemy. It was a concept as alien to me as peace or mercy, and it had broken me. I was no longer a weapon. I was compromised, a failure, a heretic to my own brutal creed. Just then, a hidden panel in my wall chimed softly. A single coded note. A priority message. My blood ran cold. I had not heard that chime in months. With a shaking hand, I pressed my thumb to the panel. It slid open, and a tiny scroll of synth parchment, delivered by a microservitor drone, dropped into my palm. The message was brief, the encrypted text unscrambling before my eyes. Target: Valerius Corvo. Asset network confirmed. Termination sanctioned. Execute within 1 standard cycle. Ave Imperator. The order had come, the culmination of 3 years of work. The moment my entire life had been built for. Kill Valerius. My mission was finally at its end. I looked at the kill order, then at my own reflection in the polished steel wall. The face of Sylvanas stared back, her honey-colored eyes wide with a terror no one had ever designed them to show. My mission was to kill the Lord of the House, and in doing so, I would be utterly destroying the life of the only person I had ever cared for. I would be returning her to the cage, or worse, leaving her to be crushed in the gears of the Imperium's righteous retribution. My hand went to the cabinet, my fingers closing around a cool, pewter vial of polymorphine. I needed to escape. I needed to not be the woman who had to make this choice. I uncapped the vial, the scent of ozone filling my lungs, but for the first time, it offered no comfort, only the promise of a deeper, more profound oblivion. The choice was not between duty and dereliction. It was between 2 different kinds of death. The death of a weapon, or the death of a soul. And I no longer knew which one I was meant to be. The kill order felt heavier than a world. It was a slip of synth parchment, no bigger than my palm, but in its encoded sigils lay the weight of my past and the damnation of my future. For a long moment I simply stood there, the assassin and the woman trapped in a single skin, waging a silent, bloody war in the space behind my eyes. The face in the mirror steel was Sylvana, the perfect, placid mask. But her eyes were wide with the raw animal terror of a creature caught in a trap it had meticulously built for itself. The vial of polymorphine in my hand was a siren, its sterile ozone promise a song of sweet oblivion. 1 injection, 1 blessed, agonizing dissolution, and I could become someone else. Someone who did not know the feel of Elara's fingers on her skin. Someone who did not see her peaceful, sleeping face burned onto the inside of her eyelids. Someone who could kill a man and feel nothing but the cold satisfaction of a completed task. The killer I was supposed to be. My thumb, moved to break the vial's seal. It was the movement of a drowning woman reaching for a stone. But then another image intruded. Elara, standing on the balcony, her voice a whisper against the hum of the carnivorous orchids. "Be careful, Sylvana. Beauty is the first thing a man like my husband seeks to break." She had not been speaking of my face. She had been speaking of the small, fragile flicker of humanity she saw in me, a thing I did not even know existed. She had tried to warn me, to protect me. And now my own hand was poised to do what Valerius never could, to break that last infinitesimal piece of myself completely. To flee into the drug's gray fog would be the ultimate act of cowardice. It would be a betrayal far deeper than any dereliction of duty. It would be a betrayal of her. With a shudder that racked my entire body, I placed the vial back in its cradle. The siren's song faded, replaced by the grating shriek of my own thoughts. The mission was absolute. The order was immutable. Valerius Corvo had to die. To fail meant my own death, a trivial price. But it also meant that all of this, the years of deception, the degradation, the slow erosion of my soul, would be for nothing. Valerius would continue his treason. He would continue his abuse. And Elara would remain in her gilded cage, her spirit slowly bleeding out, day by day. No, I could not allow that. My conditioning and my newfound heart, for the first and perhaps last time, screamed the same command. He must die. But the parameters of the victory had changed. It was no longer enough to simply eliminate the target. I had to save the asset. The non-essential, politically inconsequential, breathtakingly precious asset. A new mission objective bloomed in the ruins of my mind. A beautiful, heretical flower growing from blood-soaked soil. I would not just be his executioner. I would be her salvation. The next 24 hours were a masterpiece of cold fury. The emotional storm within me was caged, its energy channeled into a chilling, crystalline focus. I was the Callidus again, a weaver of lies, a ghost in the machine. Every action was precise, every word a carefully sharpened tool. I moved through the palace, not as Sylvana, the languid consort, but as a phantom of pure purpose. First, I accessed Valerius's private ledgers through a back channel I had cultivated months ago. With deft, surgical strokes, I altered the records, weaving a new narrative into the data streams. I fabricated a series of massive, unauthorized fund transfers from Valerius's accounts to an off-world holding corporation owned by his chief rival, Duke Arcturus. I planted encrypted communications, forged with the Duke's own cipher keys, that spoke of a palace coup, of an alliance to depose Valerius, with the Duke promising to take care of the Lady Elara once the throne was his. It was a crude, brutal frame, but Valerius was a man of supreme arrogance and paranoia. He would not look for subtlety when his ego was threatened. Next, I found Elara. She was in the solarium, tending to a bed of pale, moth-like blossoms that only opened in the full glare of the system's sun. She looked tired, the skin under her eyes shadowed and thin. My heart ached with a physical, painful pang. I approached her as Sylvana, a vision of shimmering silks and practiced concern. I told her a story. I told her that Valerius, in a fit of pique over a trade dispute, was planning to make a show of force against Duke Arcturus. I said that he feared the Duke might try to strike at him through her, that he had arranged for her to be taken to a remote estate on the garden moon of Signax for her own safety. He has become so protective, I lied, my voice a silken purr. He commanded me to see to it personally. Your ship leaves at dusk. She looked at me, her gray eyes searching my face, not for the truth of the words, but for the truth behind them. For a terrifying second, I thought she could see it all. The killer, the lies, the desperate, loving plan. He has never been concerned for my safety before, she said, her voice barely audible over the whisper of the conservatory's air cyclers. Perhaps, I offered, stepping closer, my hand hovering near hers before I forced it to my side. He has finally realized what he stands to lose. She did not believe me. I could see it in the sad, knowing curve of her lips. But she saw something else, too. An urgency. A plea. She saw the truth of my concern, if not its source, and after a long, silent moment, she nodded. "As my lord commands," she said, the words of the cage falling from her lips for what I prayed would be the last time. The final act was for Valerius. I found him in his trophy room, a chamber of grotesque horrors, where the mounted heads of alien beasts stared down with glassy eyes, their silent screams echoing his own monstrous nature. He was drinking, pouring a viscous amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He was already celebrating the arrival of a new shipment of munitions, the final piece of his planned rebellion. He smiled as I entered, a predator's smile, all teeth and possession.
"Sylvana, my jewel," he slurred, holding his glass out. "Come, drink to our new dawn." I flowed towards him, the mask of the adoring consort firmly in place. I let him pull me against him, his breath hot and foul on my cheek. His hands roamed my body, ownership in their touch, and every cell in me screamed to cleanse the flesh from his bones. But I endured. I let him whisper his grand plans in my ear, his words of ambition and betrayal. I listened as he boasted of how the Imperium would burn, how Terra would kneel, how history would remember the name Corvo. I let him believe, until the very last second, that I was his creature, his most beautiful possession. "I have a gift for you, my lord," I whispered, my lips close to his ear, my voice dripping with seductive promise. "Oh?" he grunted, his fingers tightening on my hip. "And what is that?" "A secret," I murmured. I pulled back slightly, my eyes locked on his. My hand, hidden in the folds of my gown, closed around the hilt of the needle-thin vibro knife. "The Duke Arcturus sends his regards." The flicker of confusion in his eyes was all the opening I needed. Before the alarm could fully register, before his hand could move to the pistol at his belt, I struck. It was not a grand theatrical blow. It was a gesture of absolute economy, a motion as simple and final as a closing door. The blade slid between his fourth and fifth ribs, the high-frequency vibration silencing any sound. The monomolecular edge parting flesh, muscle, and bone as if they were water. It pierced his heart with surgical precision. His eyes widened, not in pain, but in sheer, uncomprehending shock. The glass fell from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. His body went rigid, then slackened, his dead weight slumping against me. I held him for a moment, the man whose death had been my singular purpose for 3 years, and felt nothing but a vast, hollow emptiness. I let his body slide to the floor amidst the shards of broken crystal.
The mission was complete. I did not wait for the discovery. I was already gone, melting into the service corridors and shadow-ways of the palace I knew better than its architects. I made my way to a high, secluded turret that overlooked the main spaceport. Below, the palace was beginning to stir, the first shouts of alarm like the cries of distant birds. I saw a flurry of activity around the landing pad I had designated. I saw Elara, a small, cloaked figure flanked by household guards who believed they were following their lord's orders. She walked up the ramp of a sleek system shuttle, pausing at the top to look back at the palace, her home, her prison. She could not see me. She would never see me again. The ship's engines flared to life, a brilliant wash of blue-white energy, and it lifted gracefully into the darkening sky. A single point of light carrying the only good thing in my universe away to safety, away from the purges to come, away from me. I watched until her ship was just another star in Viridia's crowded heavens. I had done it. I had served the Emperor, and I had served my heart. I had fulfilled my purpose and committed the ultimate treason. In saving her, I had destroyed myself. There was no going back. Sylvana was a ghost, a legend that would die with Valerius. The nameless assassin could not remain here. I was compromised beyond recovery, a weapon forever warped by the heat of a single, impossible emotion. I unsealed the last hidden compartment in the heel of my boot. Inside was not a weapon or a tool, but a single, dull, pewter vial of polymorphine. It was my final escape. I uncapped it, the familiar scent of ozone, a final, bitter sacrament. This time it was not to hide or to flee from a feeling. It was an act of erasure, an act of acceptance. My fate was not to have a life, but to be a function. My one act of creation was to give Elara a future. My final act would be to destroy my own past. I pressed the injector to my neck. This log is a lie, I thought, as the drug hit my system like a thunderclap. The excruciating, welcome agony of dissolution beginning its work. But for one moment, on a world of beautiful, hungry flowers, I told the truth. I loved. The pen I had used to scribe this testament fell from my fingers as my face began to melt, my features running like paint in the rain. The identity of Sylvana, the memory of Elara, the nascent soul I had discovered only to sacrifice, it all began to unravel, atom by atom, returning to the gray, formless void from whence it came, leaving only the weapon, waiting for a new face, a new name, and a new war.